The galactic council chambers fell silent as the massive holographic display showed a single vessel approaching the neutral zone. Admiral Cross of the Alterian fleet leaned forward in his chair, his four eyes narrowing at the sight. The ship was unlike anything in their databases, sleek, dark, and radiating an energy signature that made their sensors go haywire. "Just one ship," muttered Commander Vale from the Centauri delegation. "The humans send just one ship to our summit." The assembled representatives from across the galaxy shifted uneasily. For months, they had heard whispers about this new species called humans. Stories filtered through trade routes spoke of a young race that had somehow managed to defeat the Kraken horde, a feat that had taken the combined might of 12 species to accomplish just 50 years ago. Yet here they were, sending a single vessel to meet the greatest military alliance the galaxy had ever seen. Captain Ross stood on the bridge of the U.S. Defiant, watching the massive space stations and battle fleets arranged before them. His weathered face showed no emotion as he observed the display. Behind him, his crew worked silently at their stations, their movements precise and practiced. "Sir, we're receiving multiple scanning attempts," reported Lieutenant Brooks from the communication station. "Should I raise shields?" "No need," Ross replied calmly. "Let them look. They won't understand what they're seeing anyway." On the Alterian flagship, Admiral Cross frowned at the readings his science officer was providing. "This makes no sense. The ship appears to be standard cruiser class, but these power ratings are off the charts. And what is this strange energy field surrounding it?" "Unknown, sir," the science officer replied, his voice trembling slightly. "Our computers cannot identify the technology. It's as if they're using principles of physics we haven't discovered yet." The human ship moved with a grace that defied its size, gliding through the defensive formations like they were mere obstacles. Not once did it deviate from its course or acknowledge the hundreds of weapons trained upon it. The confidence was either admirable or terrifyingly foolish. Ambassador Fane of the Void Runners Consortium watched nervously as the human vessel approached the designated meeting coordinates. His species had been the first to encounter humans in battle, and the memory still gave him nightmares. 3 of their finest battle groups had engaged what appeared to be a small human patrol. Within hours, all 3 groups had been reduced to scrap metal and escape pods. "They fight like demons," he whispered to his aide. No fear, no hesitation, no mercy. The other delegates had dismissed his reports as exaggeration. How could a species that had barely left their home system possess such devastating military capability? Yet here was their representative, alone and unafraid in the heart of enemy territory. Captain Ross checked his watch, an ancient timepiece that had belonged to his grandfather. In exactly 3 minutes, he would make contact with the Galactic Council. His orders were simple: assess the threat and report back. What Earth Command hadn't told the Council was that the Defiant wasn't just any ship. "Captain," called out Ensign Park from the tactical station, "I'm reading massive weapons arrays on those ships. Some of them could crack a planet." "Noted," Ross replied. "Mr. Davis, begin recording everything. Earth will want to see this." The tension in the council chambers was thick enough to cut with a plasma torch. Species that had fought each other for centuries found themselves united in their confusion and growing concern about these humans. How had such a young race developed technology that their greatest minds couldn't comprehend? "Perhaps," suggested Counselor Vex of the Spiral Alliance, "we should consider the possibility that we have underestimated them." "Underestimated?" Admiral Cross scoffed. "They're barely past their nuclear age. Our intelligence indicates they only achieved faster-than-light travel 60 years ago. What could they possibly possess that threatens us?" The human ship finally came to rest at the designated coordinates, its dark hull reflecting the light from nearby stars like a mirror made of midnight. For several long moments, nothing happened. Then, a transmission cut through the void, clear, calm, and in perfect galactic standard. "This is Captain Ross of the United Earth ship Defiant. We come in response to your invitation for diplomatic talks." The voice was steady, professional, and utterly without fear. In the background, those with sensitive hearing could detect something else, the faint hum of machinery that seemed to pulse like a living heartbeat. What the Galactic Council didn't know was that they were about to discover why Earth had sent only one ship. They were about to learn that when humans went to war, one ship was often all they needed. The galaxy was about to discover the true meaning of human determination. Asterisk. The silence stretched across the void as Captain Ross's transmission echoed through the council chambers. Admiral Cross was the first to recover, his mandibles clicking in what his species considered amusement. "Captain Ross," the Admiral's voice boomed through the communication array. "Your arrival has been noted. However, before we begin any meaningful discussions, the Council requires a demonstration of your species' capabilities." Ross raised an eyebrow, but remained calm. "What kind of demonstration?" "Combat trials," declared Commander Vale, stepping forward in the council chamber. "Our champion squadron will engage your vessel in simulated combat. Non-lethal, of course, but it will give us a proper measure of human military strength." On the bridge of the Defiant, Lieutenant Brooks turned to his captain with concern. "Sir, I'm reading 12 heavy cruisers moving into attack formation. Their combined firepower could level a small moon." Captain Ross studied the tactical display with the same expression he might use to examine a weather report. The approaching ships were impressive, sleek vessels bristling with plasma cannons, missile pods, and energy shields that shimmered like soap bubbles in space. "Mr. Park," Ross said quietly, "bring our systems to combat readiness." "Standard protocols." "Standard protocols, sir?" Ensign Park's voice carried a hint of surprise. "Not enhanced combat mode?" "Standard will be sufficient," Ross replied. In the council chambers, the delegates watched their screens with growing excitement. This would finally put the human mystery to rest. 12 of their finest vessels against one human ship. The outcome was obvious. Admiral Cross activated his fleet communication system. "Champion Squadron, you are cleared to engage. Show them the might of the Galactic Alliance." The lead ship, a massive Centauri dreadnought, opened fire first. Brilliant blue plasma bolts streaked across space toward the Defiant. The other ships followed, creating a web of deadly energy that would have vaporized any known vessel. The attack struck the human ship and simply disappeared. No explosions, no shield flares, no damage at all. The Defiant sat in space as if nothing had happened. "Impossible," breathed Commander Vale. "Nothing can absorb that much energy without some kind of reaction." Captain Ross's voice came through the communication channels, still perfectly calm. "Is that your standard greeting?" "On Earth, we usually start with handshakes." The champion squadron regrouped and launched their second wave, this time coordinating their assault with military precision. Missiles, plasma torpedoes, and concentrated beam weapons all converged on the human vessel simultaneously. Again, nothing. The Defiant remained pristine and undamaged. "Sir," Park whispered on the bridge, "should we return fire?" Ross glanced at his grandfather's watch. "One warning shot, Mr. Park. Something gentle." The Defiant's response was barely visible, a thin beam of silver light that lasted less than a second. It struck the lead Centauri ship and passed harmlessly through its shields, through its armor, and out the other side. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the massive dreadnought simply stopped. All its systems went dark. Life support remained functional, but every weapon, every engine, every offensive capability had been surgically disabled. The remaining 11 ships hesitated, their captains staring in disbelief at their readings. "How?" Admiral Cross demanded. "How did you disable a fully shielded dreadnought without destroying it?" The same way we've been absorbing your attacks, Ross replied. We asked it nicely to stop working. In the council chambers, panic began to set in. Ambassador Thane of the Void Runners felt his worst fears confirmed. These humans weren't just advanced. They were operating on a completely different level of technology. Captain Ross, Counselor Vex's voice carried a new tone of respect mixed with fear. Perhaps we should skip the remaining trials and proceed directly to negotiations. That would be wise, Ross agreed. Though I should mention, what you've seen so far represents about 2% of our defensive capabilities. The champion squadron retreated in confusion, their disabled flagship being towed back to the station. In the council chambers, heated discussions broke out among the delegates. Some called for immediate alliance, others for preemptive strike, and a few suggested surrender. Admiral Cross silenced them all with a gesture. Captain Ross, the Council would like to invite you aboard our station for face-to-face negotiations. Will you accept our hospitality? Ross smiled grimly. Of course. But Admiral, there's something you should know before we begin formal talks. What's that? The Defiant isn't our most advanced ship. In fact, it's not even in our top 50. Ross paused, letting that sink in. We sent our oldest active vessel because we thought it would be less intimidating. The silence that followed was deafening. Across the galaxy, military commanders began running new calculations. Scientists questioned their understanding of physics, and politicians wondered if they had just witnessed the rise of a new galactic superpower. But Captain Ross knew the truth would be far more terrifying than they could imagine. Asterisk. The Council's main conference chamber had been designed to intimidate. Crystalline walls rose 30 meters high, carved with the histories of a dozen civilizations. Representatives from across the galaxy sat in a perfect circle, their varied forms creating a display of the Alliance's diversity and power. Captain Ross entered alone, his simple blue uniform stark against the ornate surroundings. He carried no weapons, no ceremonial decorations, just a small data pad and that ancient watch on his wrist. Yet every eye in the chamber followed his measured steps to the center. Captain, Admiral Cross began, his voice echoing in the vast space. Your demonstration has raised ... questions. I imagine it has, Ross replied, settling into the chair provided for him. He seemed completely at ease, as if he were discussing the weather rather than technology that had just redefined galactic warfare. Ambassador, Thane leaned forward, his scaled hands gripping the table. 3 months ago, my people lost an entire battle fleet to a single human patrol ship. Today, we watched you disable our champion with what appeared to be a child's toy. How is this possible? Ross was quiet for a long moment, his fingers drumming against the datapad. How much do you know about human history, Ambassador? Very little, Thane admitted. You've been remarkably secretive about your past, with good reason. Ross activated his datapad, and a holographic display filled the air above them. It showed a blue-green world orbiting a yellow star. Earth, our home. 67 years ago, we were exactly what your intelligence report suggested. A young species taking its first steps into space. The display shifted, showing primitive spacecraft and early space stations. The assembled delegates relaxed slightly. This matched what they knew. Then we found something, Ross continued. The hologram changed, showing a massive excavation site on Earth's moon. Deep beneath the lunar surface, our miners discovered a structure, ancient beyond measure, clearly not of human origin. Counselor Vex's compound eyes widened. You found ruins? Not ruins, Ross corrected. A ship, intact, waiting. The holographic display now showed a vessel, unlike anything in the galactic databases. Its design was elegant yet alien, with curves and angles that seemed to shift depending on the viewing angle. Even as a mere projection, It seemed to radiate in presence that made several delegates shift uncomfortably. "We called them the architects," Ross explained. "We never found their bodies, never discovered where they came from or where they went. But they left behind something incredible, not just their technology, but their knowledge, encoded in crystalline matrices that took us decades to understand." Admiral Cross scoffed. "You expect us to believe that your advancement comes from some mysterious ancient race?" Ross smiled without humor. "I expect you to believe the evidence of your own sensors. The energy field around the Defiant isn't generated by fusion reactors or antimatter cores. It's powered by principles that exist outside normal spacetime. The weapon that disabled your ship didn't fire energy or matter. It transmitted information directly to your computer systems." The chamber erupted in discussions as delegates argued among themselves. The implications were staggering. If humans had access to technology from a vanished civilization, it explained everything: their rapid advancement, their impossible capabilities, their confidence. "But why tell us this?" asked Commander Vale. "Why reveal your secret?" Ross's expression grew grave. The holographic display shifted again, showing star charts with vast sections marked in ominous red. "Because the architects didn't vanish voluntarily. They left warnings scattered throughout their ship. Something drove them away, something that returns in cycles measured in millennia." The red areas on the star chart began to pulse, showing a pattern that originated from the galaxy's outer rim and swept inward like a wave of destruction. "The Devourers," Ross said quietly. "That's what we call them, though the architect's name for them doesn't translate well. Every 50,000 years, they emerge from dark space and consume everything in their path. Entire civilizations, whole star systems. Nothing survives their passage." Ambassador Thane's voice was barely a whisper. "When? Our calculations suggest they'll reach the outer systems within 5 years, Ross replied. "The inner core worlds have perhaps 10 years before the first wave arrives." The silence that followed was profound. Several delegates stared at their own star charts, suddenly seeing them not as territories to be conquered, but as targets for annihilation. "The architects fought them once," Ross continued. "Lost. But before they fled to parts unknown, they scattered their technology across the galaxy. Ships, weapons, knowledge, hoping that younger races might succeed where they failed." Admiral Cross found his voice. "How many of these ships have you found?" "On Earth?" "Just the one." Ross paused, watching their expressions carefully. "But our deep space surveys have detected 17 more scattered across Alliance territory. Most are buried, hidden, or disguised as natural phenomena. The implications hit them like a physical blow. 17 ships of architect technology, waiting to be discovered by whoever found them first. The question," Ross said, standing slowly, "is whether we face this threat together, or waste precious time fighting each other while extinction approaches." Asterisk. The council chamber remained silent for several heartbeats after Ross's revelation. Then chaos erupted. Delegates shouted across the chamber in a dozen languages, demanding answers, making accusations, and arguing over the implications of the architect technology scattered throughout their territories. Admiral Cross slammed his massive fist against the table, the sound echoing like a thunderclap. Silence. The room gradually quieted. "Captain Ross, you claim these Devourers represent an extinction-level threat. What proof do you offer beyond ancient warnings?" Ross activated his datapad again. The holographic display shifted to show a section of space that appeared empty, just darkness dotted with a few distant stars. 3 weeks ago, the long-range sensors on our deep space monitoring station detected something in the void between galaxies. The image zoomed in, revealing structures that defied comprehension. Massive geometric shapes drifted through the emptiness, each one easily the size of a small moon. They moved with purpose, consuming the sparse matter they encountered and growing larger with each feeding. Our xenobiologists have been studying the architect records, Ross continued. The devourers aren't a species in any sense we understand. They're something else, a form of organized entropy that breaks down matter and energy at the quantum level. They don't conquer civilizations. They unmake them. Counselor Vex's breathing quickened as she studied the display. How many? The advanced scouts number in the thousands. Behind them ... double quotes. Ross manipulated the display to show a wider view. The empty space between galaxies wasn't empty at all. It writhed with countless shapes, a swarm so vast it blocked out entire star fields. Our estimates suggest millions, possibly billions of individual units. Ambassador Thane stood abruptly, his chair clattering backward. This is impossible. No force could threaten the entire galaxy. The combined fleets of the Alliance number over 1 million vessels. The architects had similar confidence. Ross replied grimly. According to their records, they commanded a civilization that spanned 3 galaxies. Their technology made our current understanding of physics look like cave paintings. It wasn't enough. The display changed again, showing what appeared to be a battle scene. Magnificent vessels fired weapons that tore holes in space itself, while geometric horrors absorbed the attacks and continued their relentless advance. World after world fell dark as the devourers passed over them, leaving behind only lifeless husks stripped of every particle of useful matter. They learn, Ross explained. Every weapon used against them becomes less effective. Every defensive strategy is eventually overcome. The architects fought them for 10,000 years across multiple galaxies before finally accepting defeat. Commander Vale's voice cracked slightly. What happened to the architect homeworlds? Ross was quiet for a moment. Gone, not destroyed, erased. As if they never existed. The only traces left are the ships they scattered, and the warning messages encoded within them. Admiral Cross studied the tactical data with a military commander's eye. You said the architects scattered technology across our galaxy. How much have you actually recovered? Earth has 1 ship and partial records from another site on Mars. We've built our entire fleet around reverse-engineered architect principles, but we're still decades away from fully understanding what we found. Ross paused. The Defiant represents our best attempt to recreate their defensive systems. Against the Devourers, it would last perhaps 30 seconds. The weight of that statement settled over the chamber like a shroud. If humanity's most advanced vessel was utterly inadequate, what hope did conventional fleets have? However, Ross continued, the architects left us more than just ships. They left a strategy. The holographic display showed a new star map, this one marking specific locations throughout Alliance space. Points of light pulsed in careful sequence, creating a pattern that seemed almost alive. The architect sites aren't randomly scattered, Ross explained. They form a network, a defensive grid designed to be activated simultaneously. Each site contains components for a larger weapon system. Individually, they're powerful but limited. Together, ... the pattern on the star map shifted, showing energy connections forming between the sites. The resulting network pulsed with potential power that made several delegates step back. Instinctively, a galaxy-spanning weapon, whispered Counselor Vex. Capable of what? According to the architect records, it can create a barrier of folded space-time around our galaxy, essentially hiding us from the Devourers until they pass by. Ross's expression darkened. The problem is activation. It requires coordinated effort from all 17 sites, and the energy demands are enormous. One miscalculation, one failed component, and the entire system collapses. Admiral Cross leaned forward. What do you need from us? Complete cooperation. Every site must be excavated, studied, and prepared simultaneously. We'll need to share all our architect research, coordinate our efforts, and trust each other completely. Ross looked around the chamber. And we have approximately 4 years to accomplish what the architects spent centuries building. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of impossible choices. Unite or perish. Trust or fall to ancient horrors beyond imagination. There's one more thing, Ross added quietly. The activation process will require a sacrifice. Asterisk, the word sacrifice, hung in the air like a death sentence. Admiral Cross felt his secondary heart skip a beat as he processed the implications. Around the chamber, delegates exchanged fearful glances, their earlier bravado replaced by growing dread. What kind of sacrifice? Commander Vale asked, though her voice suggested she didn't want to know the answer. Ross activated his datapad one final time. The holographic display showed the interior of the architect ship they had discovered. Vast chambers filled with crystalline structures that pulsed with dormant energy. At the center stood a single platform, clearly designed for one occupant. The weapon system requires a living consciousness to guide it, Ross explained. Someone must interface directly with the network, become part of it. The process is irreversible. Whoever takes on that role will exist only as part of the defensive grid, maintaining it for as long as necessary. Ambassador Thane slumped in his chair. You're asking us to unite our fleets, share our most guarded secrets, and sacrifice someone to power a weapon we don't understand, based on the warnings of a dead civilization? Yes, Ross replied simply. That's exactly what I'm asking. The chamber erupted again, but this time the arguments were different. These weren't debates about territory or resources. These were the desperate calculations of species facing extinction. Some delegates demanded more proof, others suggested fleeing to distant galaxies, and a few began calculating which worlds they could abandon to buy time. Admiral Cross stood slowly, his massive frame commanding attention. Captain Ross, you've shown us impossible technology and spoke of ancient threats. But you haven't answered the most important question. Why should we trust humanity? Ross met the Admiral's gaze steadily. Because we're already committed to this path, regardless of your decision. The holographic display changed, showing Earth's solar system. But now it revealed the truth. The entire system had been transformed into a fortress. Massive orbital platforms surrounded every planet, space stations the size of moons orbited in perfect formation, and ships beyond counting patrolled the outer edges. For 60 years, we've been preparing for this moment, Ross continued. Every resource, every breakthrough, every advancement has been focused on one goal, standing against the devourers. We've built weapons that reshape reality, trained crews who think in 4 dimensions, and accepted that our entire civilization might not survive the coming storm. Commander Vale stared at the display in amazement. Your entire species is militarized. Not militarized, Ross corrected. Unified. Every human alive understands what's coming. Every child learns architect mathematics alongside their native language. Every adult contributes to the defense effort in some way. We've transformed ourselves from a scattered collection of nations into a single entity with one purpose. The display zoomed in on Earth itself, revealing the planet's surface covered with research facilities, training centers, and manufacturing complexes. Cities had been redesigned around the principles of architect technology. Even the planet's weather patterns had been modified to support the massive industrial effort. This is madness, breathed Counselor Vex. You've turned your entire world into a weapon. We've turned our entire world into a shield, Ross replied. And we're prepared to use it whether you join us or not. But our calculations show that Earth alone cannot power the full defensive network. We need the architect sites in Alliance space, and we need crews trained in their operation. Admiral Cross studied the tactical implications with growing respect and horror. Humanity had spent decades preparing for a war that might never come, based on evidence from a vanished civilization. It was either the greatest act of faith in galactic history or the most elaborate mass delusion ever conceived. What if you're wrong? The Admiral asked. What if the Devourers never come, or your ancient weapon fails, or the sacrifice means nothing? Ross smiled grimly. Then we'll have spent 60 years building the most advanced defensive network in galactic history, and we'll be ready for whatever else the universe throws at us. The chamber fell silent as delegates considered their options. Outside the station's viewports, the stars continued their ancient dance, unaware that entire civilizations were debating their survival. Finally, Ambassador Thane spoke. If we agree to this alliance, who makes the ultimate sacrifice? Who interfaces with the weapon? Ross checked his grandfather's watch one more time, then carefully removed it from his wrist. That decision has already been made. I volunteered the moment Earth confirmed the Devourer threat. Win or lose, Captain Ross ends this war as part of something larger. He placed the watch on the table between them, a simple timepiece that had counted the hours of ordinary human life, now marking the moments before everything changed. The question isn't who will sacrifice themselves, Ross said quietly. The question is whether that sacrifice will be remembered by a living galaxy or lost in the silence of empty space. Admiral Cross looked around the chamber one final time, seeing in each delegate's face the reflection of his own choice, unity or extinction. When do we begin? The end asterisk